Piss John. Yeah. Hello, you beautiful people. It's so good to see you all again. So, the John Wick trilogy. For some reason, when the first film came out back in 2014, I didn't really take that much interest in it. There was just something about the trailer, and I thought to myself, oh, okay, the whole premise sounds a bit dumb. So I kind of avoided it until recently when I kept hearing praise for all three movies, and I thought to myself, well, if all three movies are getting praise and they're doing well, then I'm possibly missing out on something. And holy shit, guys, I was missing out on something. That's why I thought to myself, I need to do a ranking video just so I can talk about every single movie in this trilogy because it's just amazing. Some of the best action I have seen filmed. Maybe not as action-packed and maybe not as well filmed as Mission Impossible, but this is still an amazing trilogy. So I'm going to kick off a ranking video right now. Last place is John Wick Chapter 3. Now, overall, this film is still great, but it shows that there's a dip in quality, which I notice is a very common thing with certain action trilogies. Then the third entry sort of goes downhill slightly. The only action trilogy which I've seen personally that keeps getting better and better and better, bar from maybe one film, is the Mission Impossible trilogy. But this trilogy overall, I haven't seen a bad movie in the entire thing, but there is a dip in quality and it does show sometimes. So the action scenes are still incredibly well filmed, wide angles, you can see what's going on, but sometimes the action scenes have a slight thing in this film where they decide to just go on and on and on and on. Not saying that the action scenes are not exciting in this film, but there's a certain point where you're like, whoa, is this still going on? Is John Wick going to kill this guy already? One scene in particular is the one scene where he's fighting the two Chinese twins. That scene seems to go on forever and ever and ever. Now, the action scenes are really exciting, but there's a certain point where you're like, okay, I think I'm ready for something else to happen now, or maybe him fight someone different. Halle Berry is one of the highlights of this film. She kicks ass. She absolutely keeps up with Keanu Reeves and everything she does in the film. Action sequences, story, and just general acting. One of my favourite scenes in particular is the one scene where Halle Berry and John Wick are going through this certain area, killing all these bad guys. Halle Berry's got two dogs, setting the dogs on the bad guys. The dogs even go for the nuts half the time. It's pretty entertaining stuff. But to get to my two main complaints will have to be the one scene where John Wick decides to go and serve under the high table again to avoid certain death, to remember his wife. But then in the very following scene, he goes back on that decision, which didn't make a lot of sense to me. It does make sense that John Wick would eventually go back on that decision, but not almost immediately like he did. There was no build-up, there was no suspense to that exact scene, which made him change his mind. It was just a quick little montage with him and the manager from the hotel, and then suddenly he's back to killing the high table again. Now, the second complaint I have with this movie in particular is something which is incredibly... It got to the point where it got a bit stupid. Now, I know with these films, they shouldn't be taken seriously. There are like injuries that happen in these movies which could kill the characters. But this one was just a bit ridiculous. At the very end, when the manager shoots John Wick, when the high table offer him a parlay, John Wick falls from a damn building, smashing against one building and then falling on the floor. That would have killed anybody, and there's no way someone survives that, but for some reason John Wick just survives it. And I bet in the fourth one he's going to be up and kicking ass again. So overall, that didn't really make a lot of sense. John Wick Chapter 3 gets a B-. Now, second place, to a lot of people's surprise, is going to be the first John Wick. Now, obviously, this was a surprise when it first came out, and obviously me watching it recently, it surprised the hell out of me as well. John Wick is this seriously dark character. He has a lot of anger. As people say, he's a man of pure will. You can see just from his character in general just how much anger he actually has. The one scene where Viggo's son is threatening to take his car and his dog, John Wick goes on some kind of... There's a weird scene where he's driving his car like a complete idiot, but that's maybe his way of dealing with the stress, and that's interesting. John Wick is such a badass in this film. Even the bad guys reference him as the boogeyman. The bad guys had the look of fear in their eyes. This is not the typical action film where the hero fears the villain. The villain in this film fears the hero. The editing choices are absolutely fantastic in the way that the action is filmed. Now, obviously, this was a bit more of a surprise to me to begin with than the other two. mainly because this is obviously the first John Wick film I watched. Well, we start with the first one, obviously. And seeing just how well the action was filmed, wide shots, you can see Keanu Reeves kicking ass. It reminded me of that one scene in The Matrix, which was also filmed with wide angles. So from great editing, great action, a cool character, the music choices fit the tone perfectly. And when I say there's great action, there is fantastic action. John Wick will literally slam a guy against the fucking wall, reload his gun, and then shoot him in the head. The bad guys fear the hero. John Wick is a cool character. And overall, this film is just fantastic. John Wick gets an A. But first place has to be John Wick Chapter 2. Now, this is a direct lead-off from the first John Wick. Now, this film, to me, had the best action and the best story. Now, the first John Wick, one thing it did lack was the fact that John Wick doesn't have a lot of character to him other than he has a lot of anger, and some of his story is told from the perspective of others. But in this one, it really shows that this guy, he's a nice guy, just don't fuck with his life. So with the opening scene, there's already cool action. John Wick bursts into this big room full of mobsters. He's trying to get his car back. That's right, he's just going for his car. This film has potentially the best fight scene I have seen in the entire trilogy. John Wick versus the bald guy. I can't remember the guy's name. I'll list it down below right here. The action scene didn't feel like it was extended too long, like some of the scenes in John Wick 3. It was just pure, intense amazingness. Amazingness isn't a word, but I don't even care. That's how it feels to me. But it's not without its flaws, but there's not many at all, really. Sometimes you can get a bit confusing with who's who in terms of characters and what John Wick's doing. Everyone seems to know who he is. There's just this random person that pops up out of nowhere. Oh, hey, John. Another person over there. Oh, hey, John. But that's mainly a nitpick, really. That scene, and also the one scene where there's a big concert going on at the Coliseum. John Wick is going in there to assassinate a target. And pretty much when the action kicks off, there are people dying in these crowds. And the crowds just don't seem fazed by the bodies dropping in front of them. Now, I find it hard to buy the fact that everyone in that entire crowd is an assassin. I seriously doubt it. It's a bit silly. But overall, the great action, the story, Keanu Reeves, you just brush past those little things and you don't even think about them eventually. It leaves off on the most exciting cliffhanger ever. There is an international bounty on John Wick's head, and now it's pretty much him versus the world. So overall, from great filled action, intense montages, and great character stories, John Wick Chapter 2 is my all-time favourite for me. So let me know, guys, what do you think of my list? Do you agree with me or do you not? But John Wick 2 is the champion here, and John Wick 2 gets an A+. Tell me, guys, what do you think of the John Wick films down below in the comments? Share your list. I hope you have a fantastic day as always. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I upload at least once a week. Remember, you are awesome. Take care.
Winston, tell them all. Whoever comes, whoever it is, I'll kill them. I'll kill them all.